The briny scent of salt and seaweed hung in the evening air. Drifting over the small harbor of Seagrove Bay, wooden docks creaked under the gentle motion of tide, while scattered fishing boats bobbed in their berths. Lantern-like dock lights cast warm circles on the water's rippled surface. Among the rows of vessels, some painted bright blues and greens. Others rusted with years of heavy use, stood a modest trawler named Bluefin's Hope. Its paint showed signs of wear, but the hull remained sturdy from decades of devoted upkeep by its owner. Davis Sullivan. Davis, a quiet man in his early 40s, had carved out a life on these waters, rising before dawn to catch fish in the bay's channels, or sometimes traveling further for deep-sea hauls. Many in Seagrove considered him dependable but solitary, more comfortable with salt spray and engine hum than with casual small talk. Yet, one companion was always at his side, Avery, a stocky pitbull with a brindle coat and earnest brown eyes. Locals sometimes raised eyebrows at the dog's presence on a fishing boat. But Davis trusted Avery implicitly. He'd rescued her from a city shelter years ago, sensing a calm steadiness in her posture despite the breed's maligned reputation. With patient training, Avery adapted to boat life, stable footing on slick decks, ignoring passing seabirds, and standing guard against the subtle hazards of the open water. Over time, she became as integral to Davis's routine as the nets and lines. Her sharp senses often alerted him to minor boat issues, like a slight tilt in the deck from shifting cargo, or a rope that had come unmoored. Some claimed she had a nose for trouble. This particular summer dusk, Davis stood on the deck of Bluefin's Hope, checking an inventory of supplies for the next morning's outing. He planned to sail before sunrise toward deeper waters, hoping to land a solid catch of halibut. Avery sat near the door to the cabin, nose lifted to the faint breeze off the bay. The tide sloshed gently at the hull, the boat swaying in a hypnotic lull. A fellow fisherman, Marco, passed along the dock, giving a polite nod. Heading out early, DAV? Davis nodded, hoping to get a jump on the tide. Marco crouched to pat Avery's head. Every time I see that dog, I'm reminded pit bulls can be sweet. She rides well? Davis cracked a small smile. She's safer on deck than some of my mates. That's for sure. They shared a brief chuckle, and Marco continued onto his own boat. Avery, tail wagging softly, padded across the deck to Davis, as if double-checking his tasks. He scratched behind her ears. Come on, let's settle in, he murmured, stowing gear in the boat's small cabin. This cabin was cramped but functional, a simple bunk, a worn chart table, and equipment racks along the walls. Davis had installed a thick mat in one corner, Avery's unofficial bed when they stayed out on overnight trips. Darkness deepened across the bay. Davis flicked on a lantern inside the cabin, its yellow glow revealing the well-used instrument panels. He double-checked the boat's bilge pump function and tested the radio. Satisfied, he stepped outside, scanning the harbor. He inhaled briny air, letting the hush calm him. Avery followed, pressing her muzzle to his leg. Maybe it was the dog's subtle way of reminding him that everything was in order, a nightly ritual they shared. Come dawn, the wharf stirred with subdued hustle. Boat engines rumbled to life. Fishers slogged through final checks. Gulls circled overhead in search of scraps. Davis, rising early as usual, loaded additional provisions into Bluefin's Hope, fresh water, a small stash of food, extra flares just in case. Avery paced the deck with mild excitement. She recognized the shift in routine that signaled a day at sea. Davis powered up the engine. The diesel's throaty hum a comforting note in the quiet. Lines were cast off, and slowly, the trawler glided away from the dock, the rising sun casting gold streaks across the bay's surface. The morning's voyage was idyllic at first. Smooth waters, a light breeze, minimal chop. Avery perched near the bow, occasionally sniffing sea air. Davis steered them toward deeper channels, scanning for signs of fish. He used a small fish finder, though years of experience told him to watch for shifting currents or flocks of seabirds as better indicators. Around mid-morning, they found a decent spot, dropping anchor and setting lines. Avery watched each step with calm interest. She'd seen it all before. Hours passed in a quiet routine, Davis tending lines, reeling in moderate catches, stowing them in a chilled hold. Avery dozed off and on, occasionally pricking her ears if something unusual stirred, like a sudden flop of a landed fish or a tang of unfamiliar engine noise from a passing vessel. The day's warmth beat down, so Davis offered Avery water, ensuring she stayed cool. By early afternoon, Davis decided to move to another spot. The catches, though decent, hadn't been as plentiful as he'd hoped. He hoisted anchor, started the engine, and navigated further offshore. The waves were a bit choppier, but manageable. Avery stood near the cabin's door, tail wagging each time Davis glanced her way, as if checking he was okay. Roughly an hour into the new location, the wind picked up unexpectedly. Clouds gathered on the horizon, nothing dire, but enough to stir a sense of caution in Davis. He resolved to keep an eye on the skies. Avery paced the deck, sniffing the air. Davis reeled in a line, half lost in thought about potential storms. Then Avery let out a low whine, stepping carefully along the starboard side. Davis frowned, her posture signaled unease. Sometimes she detected shifting loads below deck or a slack line. He followed her, checking for tangles or net snags. Nothing obvious, yet Avery persisted, pawing at the deck. The dog's brow furrowed, ears pinned forward. Davis stooped, placing a palm to the metal deck plating, wondering if she sensed unusual vibration. The engine sounded normal, no alarming rattles. He considered that water might be sloshing in the bilge, but the pump hadn't triggered. Still, Avery's insistence nagged him. He decided to open a hatch leading to the lower compartments. Shining a flashlight, at first glance, it seemed fine, no water pooling, no sign of trouble. Avery stuck her nose in, sniffing vigorously, letting out a small bark. A hint of worry tugged at Davis. "Easy, girl, let me check thoroughly." He rummaged deeper, scanning the underside of the hull, running a hand along metal surfaces. At one spot near the stern, his fingertips felt a faint dampness along a welded seam. Could this be a leak forming? He frowned, wiping it with a rag. No visible drip, but maybe a hairline crack threatened. That line of thought concerned him. Old boats sometimes carried hidden weaknesses. If left unchecked, a small crack could escalate in rough waters. Avery whimpered, almost as if urging him to address it. Davis realized he might not have discovered it so soon without Avery's restlessness. "Good call," he whispered, gently scratching her chin. He decided the best course was to remain cautious. He'd recheck once they returned to dock. Or patch if needed. For now, seas were calm enough that it didn't pose immediate hazard. He'd do a quick fix with sealant if he spotted a definite crack. He resumed fishing, but an undercurrent of tension bubbled in his mind. As the afternoon wore on, the wind edged stronger. A mild chop rattled the boat. Davis, noticing the shift, pulled anchor. "We'll head back, Avery," he announced. Better safe than sorry with a potential hull concern and weather turning. The dog wagged in agreement. As if relieved, he started the engine, adjusted course for Seagrove Bay. The ride back was rougher, waves slapping the hull. Davis kept watch on the cabin instruments, glancing repeatedly at the stern for signs of water intrusion. Avery dozed near his feet, trusting his decision. At length, they spotted the harbor's breakwater. The gloom of a building storm threatened from the west, but they beat the worst of it. By the time Bluefin's Hope docked, heavy clouds loomed overhead. Davis quickly secured lines, stowing gear. Avery hopped onto the dock with a practiced leap. Davis gave a neighborly wave to Marco, who was also tying up his boat. The air crackling with upcoming thunder, cutting it close. "DAV?" Marco teased. Davis nodded. "Saw some trouble out there. Figure I shouldn't risk it." Avery's posture reminded him of the small leak. They'd check that next. Sure enough, after the boat was moored and the day's catch offloaded, Davis pried open the lower hatch again, methodically searching. With better lighting from the dock's overhead lamps, he discovered a slight weeping from a hairline crack in the weld seam. Barely a trickle, but enough that, in a heavier sea or over time, it could worsen. A small alarm blossomed in Davis's chest, imagining if that leak escalated in a remote location. Avery's timely alert, possibly detecting a subtle shift in the hull's vibration or smell, might have averted a bigger crisis. He wiped the seam dry, applying a temporary sealant patch he kept for emergencies. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it'd hold until he got the boat to a proper yard for welding repairs. Raindrops began tapping overhead. Avery watched quietly, letting out a short sigh as though the tension had lifted now that Davis was addressing the issue. He gave her a fond pat. "You likely saved us a messy predicament," he murmured, rummaging for a tarp to cover the deck gear. The storm's first heavy drops pattered on the harbor. That night, Davis retreated to his small boathouse office, logging the day's catch and noting the hull's hairline crack in his records. Thunder rumbled outside, lightning casting sporadic flashes across the wharf. Avery lay by the door, ears flicking at each thunderclap. Davis reflected on how many times the dog had signaled a rope about to snap or a fish hold shifting precariously. This, though, felt more serious. She might have prevented a full-blown hull breach if seas had grown rough. A wave of gratitude swept him, overshadowing the day's meager catch. Word spread quietly among local fishers that Bluefin's Hope had discovered a hull problem before it escalated. Partly thanks to Avery's signals. Some teased Davis about employing a canine engineer, but the undertone was sincere admiration. In a port city where sea mishaps weren't rare, any advanced warning from a vigilant companion was prized. Marco joked he'd start training his Labrador to sniff for engine trouble. Others asked if Davis had taught Avery to detect hull issues, a concept that made him laugh. "She's just got instincts," he'd reply with a shrug. "I'd trust them." A few days later, Davis arranged for a local marine welder to examine the seam. The welder, a gruff older man named Hal, confirmed the crack was subtle but would have worsened under strain. Hal welded it shut, praising Davis for catching it early. "Could have cost you a panic if water poured in," he muttered, sparks flying from his welding torch. Davis again felt a pang of relief that Avery's whine had prompted him. Each conversation about the dog's role further chipped away at lingering prejudice. Hal, who once side-eyed Pitbulls, now chuckled. "Guess you got a real boat dog. She can sense trouble better than me," he said. Meanwhile, a local maritime blogger named Orson heard about Avery's timely detection. Orson specialized in stories of life at sea, quirky anecdotes, safety tips, remarkable tales of fishermen. Intrigued, he reached out to Davis, requesting an interview. Davis, initially hesitant about any spotlight, agreed after some coaxing. Orson arrived at the wharf with a small camera and notepad, quickly introduced himself, and asked to see Bluefin's Hope. Davis obliged, letting Orson film short clips of the boat and Avery trotting on deck. They sat on the dock, the breeze carrying hints of fish and salt. Avery lay at Davis's feet, tail occasionally thumping. Orson asked about the day's events, how the dog signaled a potential leak. Davis explained the subtle whine, Avery's pawing at the deck, leading him to discover the crack. "Without her, I might not have checked until the next rough sea," Davis admitted. "Could have been catastrophic if a real storm hit." Orson recorded this with fascination. "So effectively, your Pitbull prevented a severe maritime emergency?" Davis shrugged. "I'd say so, yes." The blogger later posted a short article titled, "Meet Avery, the Pitbull keeping fisherman's vessel afloat." A handful of photos showed Avery perched near the cabin, Davis pointing at the seam. The piece didn't go viral, but it circulated around local maritime communities. Comments ranged from curiosity about how dogs sense structural issues to praise for the breed's loyalty. Some boat owners mused about adopting a dog for safety. Others, with disclaimers, still showed caution about pit bulls. But the negative voices seemed outnumbered by open-minded ones. A few weeks later, Davis noticed changes in how folks on the dock greeted them. The once casual nod grew into a warm wave or a, "Hey, watch that boat, Avery." Others joked about letting Avery sniff their hulls for hidden cracks. Davis, stoic by nature, accepted it all with quiet humility, though inwardly proud that his dog helped reshape attitudes. He took her along for short coffee runs at a waterfront cafe, no longer worrying that patrons might recoil. Instead, some recognized the duo. The Pitbull from that blog story. Avery would wag, prompting a conversation about boat dogs. In each chat, Davis repeated the refrain that it was just a matter of training and love. A dog, Pitbull or otherwise, responded to the care you gave it. As summer slipped into autumn, the days grew shorter, mornings crisp with the promise of cooler seas. Davis planned a late-season fishing trip, hoping to stock up before winter slowed the business. This time, He invited a part-time deckhand named Emery, an older teenager from the local community wanting to learn fishing. Emery confessed to a bit of fear around pit bulls, but Davis assured him Avery was gentle. The night before the trip, they prepped lines and nets, ensuring all was in order. At sunrise, they launched Bluefin's Hope into calm waters. Avery perched proudly near the bow. Emery glanced at the dog. Wariness still in his posture. But after seeing how Avery simply sniffed his boots, tail wagging, the tension eased. "She's calm," Emery remarked, half relieved. Davis nodded. "She's my second pair of eyes on deck." The teen watched with curiosity as the dog roamed, occasionally pressing her muzzle to a rope coil or sniffing near the stern. They spent the day collecting a decent haul of cod and haddock. Emery proved eager to learn, though he needed constant reminders about safe footwork on a slick deck. Avery, as if reading the boy's nerves, occasionally positioned herself between Emery and the rail when the boat lurched. Once, the teen nearly slipped on wet planks, but Avery's sudden bark made him freeze long enough to regain balance. He stared at the dog, heart thumping. "She just warned me?" Davis shrugged a grin. "Told you, she's on guard." Emery's fear morphed into appreciation, patting Avery in gratitude. By mid-afternoon, the ocean surface turned choppy with an incoming wind, prompting them to head back early. As they navigated the waves, Emery took the helm under Davis's guidance. Avery stood near the engine hatch, a silent sentinel. The teen realized how seamlessly the dog fit into the boat's dynamic. No tension or drama, just a quiet sense of readiness. By the time they docked at Seagrove, Emery seemed thoroughly convinced of Avery's gentle competence. He left, promising to come back next time with fewer nerves around pit bulls. After the successful run, Davis realized how Avery's presence smoothed the typical friction that accompanied a new deckhand. If the boy felt unsettled, a single reassuring look from Avery seemed to ground him. It dawned on Davis that the dog was more than a guardian, she was an emotional anchor on the water. The sea could be unforgiving, and morale meant a lot on a small boat. Perhaps that intangible effect was part of the reason prejudice melted once people witnessed Avery's calm in the face of potential hazards. As autumn leaves began swirling off the shoreline trees, the wharf quieted, fewer boats ventured out, the fishing season winding down. Davis maintained a more relaxed schedule, focusing on boat maintenance, joined always by Avery. Some days, passers-by from out of town recognized them from local stories, requesting a quick photo or a pat on the dog. Davis complied politely, though he found the attention unusual for a man who used to blend in. The dog remained unaffected by the fuss. Her routine was to watch the gulls or does in a sunny patch on the dock. One gray afternoon, a small film crew approached the harbor. They were working on a short documentary about life in coastal towns, including interesting local characters or events. Word had reached them about a pitbull who'd alerted a fisherman to a hull leak. They asked if Davis might talk on camera for a segment. He hesitated, disliking the idea of cameras in his face, but a friend persuaded him that it could help the fishing community, perhaps highlight safe boat practices or break breed stigma. So, with some reluctance, he agreed. During filming, a modest group gathered on the dock, curious about the fuss. The interviewer asked Davis about the day Avery signaled trouble in the hull, how she typically behaves on the boat, whether he intentionally trained her for that. Davis gave straightforward answers, praising her keen senses, stating no special training beyond normal boat dog acclimation. Avery sat at his heel, calm, occasionally glancing at the camera lens. The crew shot B-roll footage of Davis checking the deck for dryness, Avery sniffing around, all while gentle waves lapped at the pilings. Upon wrapping, the interviewer asked if Davis had any final statement about pit bulls or dog companionship at sea. He paused, glancing at Avery. "I'd say, don't underestimate a dog's intuition. Avery's not just a label. She's a presence, one that saved me more than once from mishaps." The sea can be harsh, and sometimes your best ally has 4 paws and a big heart. The camera operator gave a thumbs up. Ending on that note, they left with promise to feature the segment in a short documentary about coastal resilience and community. Weeks later, the short piece went online, titled, "A Pitbull's Watchful Eye: Life on Seagrove's Docks." It showed brief shots of Davis and Avery on the boat, Some local commentary about how the dog prevented a major leak. The segment didn't explode into national news, but regionally it garnered a warm reception. People from nearby towns commented they never pictured a Pitbull as a boat companion. Some joked about teaching their own dogs to sniff out leaks. Others recognized parallels with the mountain rescue story they'd heard secondhand. Each small wave contributed to a growing tide of acceptance. Over time, Davis realized how integrated Avery had become in the maritime tapestry. Some captains from neighboring docks asked if they could observe how she responded to certain vibrations, or if she recognized small tilts in the deck. He'd let them watch her at the end of a day, but reminded them, she's not a machine, she just senses small changes. It might not replicate with your dog if you don't bond the same way. Yet the curiosity remained, a testament to how a single Pitbull upended traditional assumptions about dogs at sea. And so life continued. The final hush of autumn led into winter gales. Seagrove's harbor dusted by occasional snow. Davis scaled back fishing runs, focusing on net repairs or mild boat refurbishments in a small warehouse. Avery dozed near a portable heater, content with fewer outings. Once in a while, they'd roam the dock on a crisp morning, the breath of fishermen visible in the cold. Some recognized Avery's silhouette in the half-light, greeting with a casual, "Morning, girl," as if she were a longtime fixture. In a sense, she was a quiet sentinel bridging water and wharf, caution and companionship. Reflecting on it all, Davis felt a soft gratitude. He never yearned for public validation, only for safe passages and decent catches. Yet, Avery's subtle heroism had woven them into a bigger story of acceptance. Each time a child approached the dog with wonder, or a fisherman joked about your leak-detecting pit, it reaffirmed that old misconceptions can yield to lived experience. The dog's hush overshadowed barked myths, even as the coldest months approached, and the boat stayed moored more often. Davis found comfort in small interactions. He'd climb aboard Bluefin's Hope to run the engine occasionally, Avery in tow. If neighbors strolled by, they'd see the Pitbull poking her head from the cabin, tail wagging, as if greeting them to her domain. The sense of community and trust replaced any glances of wariness from the past. Davis and Avery had come full circle, from near obscurity to mild local renown, always mindful that the sea was a place of unpredictability. But they faced it together, man and dog, hull and heart. The chill of late autumn gave way to frosty mornings along Seagrove Bay, turning breath into clouds of vapor as fishermen and dockworkers started their days. Ice sometimes crusted the edges of wooden pylons, and a thin sheet of sparkling frost coated boat decks at dawn. The shift in seasons calmed business for many small fishing operations, but Davis Sullivan remained steadfast in his daily routines with Avery, his trusted Pitbull. Despite fewer runs to sea, each excursion they undertook carried an extra sense of surety. If anything subtle went amiss, Avery's keen awareness would pick it up. The talk around the harbor still touched on the day Avery had detected a leak in the hull of Davis's trawler, Bluefin's Hope. Before it escalated, the anecdote had become a quiet local legend, repeated by older captains over coffee and relayed to newcomers with a mix of respect and mild amusement. Some teased, if your vessel's got a hidden flaw, let the Pitbull sniff it out. But underlying every joke lay genuine admiration. A breed many once feared had proven itself adept in maritime life. A new spark of initiative. Early one frosty morning, Davis strolled the dock with Avery in tow. The water was tranquil, reflecting a pale sunrise. They passed Harbormaster Julie Stone, a capable woman with a perpetual streak of salt in her hair from years at sea. She waved them over, wearing an expression of growing excitement. Davis, "Morning," she greeted. Avery wagged her tail. "We're looking at ways to improve safety on these docks, especially with winter storms inbound." Julie continued, "Some folks keep ignoring basic checks. The other day, a boater nearly sank because he missed a cracked intake line. Got me thinking, perhaps we should do some voluntary boat check sessions. You know, rope inspection, hull scanning, and I was wondering if you'd share your story with Avery. How you noticed that leak." Davis paused, weighing her request. Public speaking wasn't his forte. "You're sure people want to hear it again? The tale's a bit old," he teased. Julie shook her head. "Nonsense. Stories like that remind folks to heed small warning signs. And seeing a Pitbull do boat checks might break old prejudices. Interested? He glanced at Avery, who gazed back with mild curiosity. All right, he relented. If it helps the harbor community. We'll do it, Julie beamed, patting Avery's back. Brilliant. Maybe next Saturday morning? We'll keep it informal, a short talk. A demonstration on how a dog's senses can complement good seamanship. Davis nodded, noticing how even the harbormaster's language carried respect for a Pitbull's potential. He left to gather gear for a day's short fishing run, a mild sense of pride stirring within. That evening, he told Avery about it in a half-joking monologue while the dog listened. Head tilted. We're educators now. Girl, he mused. Bet you never asked for the job. In the interim, a few neighbors who read the local maritime blog approached Davis for minor help. One older fisherman, Rhett, asked if Davis might let Avery sniff around his deck. Rhett swore he felt an odd vibration but couldn't pinpoint its source. Davis indulged him, bringing Avery aboard. The dog paced the deck, sniffing corners, but showed no alarm. Reassured, Rhett joked, "No trouble." Then, the dog's seal of approval. It became a casual saying around the docks. Avery's seal of approval for small vessel concerns. Davis found it funny, though he cautioned everyone not to rely solely on a dog. Regular maintenance is your job, he'd remind them. In another instance, a local weekly newspaper wrote an article, Pitbull Guardian of Seagrove's Waters, highlighting Avery's presence on Bluefin's hope and the mild transformations in attitudes. The piece quoted a few fishermen praising how the dog's calm nature eased tension on deck. One father, who once dragged his kid away from any Pitbull, admitted he now let his son greet Avery wholeheartedly. Sometimes we just need a living example of how gentle they can be, the father said. The article circulated among harbor families, garnering supportive comments. A few Pitbull rescue groups from other towns reached out, curious if Davis would speak at any adoption events. He politely declined big events, preferring local, tangible interactions, but inside, he recognized that Avery's influence kept growing. She was a small-scale emblem of bridging prejudice. Recounting the day the dog saved the boat from a dangerous leak provided a powerful example. And whether it changed one mind or 100, it was progress for a breed overshadowed by negative assumptions. Saturday's harbor session. The appointed Saturday dawned cold. The wharf dusted with a light frost that sparkled in the sun. A half-dozen boat owners gathered near a wide space by the main dock. Some wore thick jackets, sipping hot coffee from thermoses. Harbormaster Julie stood near a small portable heater, greeting folks with a grin. Avery sat patiently beside Davis, tail thumping whenever a friendly face approached. Julie opened the session by explaining the purpose, a winter readiness chat, checking hull integrity, lines, emergency equipment. She then introduced Davis and Avery, referencing how the dog had effectively alerted them to a hull crack. Some in attendance already knew the story, but they listened politely. Others, new to Seagrove or novices in boat ownership, eyed the Pitbull with cautious interest. Davis spoke quietly about how Avery had signaled trouble, how he double-checked the hull, discovering the hairline leak. If I'd waited another day or faced a rough sea, might have ended in a frantic patch job miles offshore, he concluded. Julie asked if Avery could do a quick demonstration. Davis complied, guiding the dog onto a volunteer's small skiff moored nearby. The volunteer, a middle-aged woman named Serena, had asked if they could see if Avery noticed anything amiss. She believed all was fine, but was curious about the dog's approach. Davis let Avery sniff the deck, corners, and the small engine compartment. Avery roamed calmly, no whining or pawing, eventually returning to Davis's side as if to say, "All good." The group laughed, and Serena exhaled, "Guess I'm leak-free." A wave of applause rose, half joking but underpinned by respect. Next, they reviewed standard best practices, checking bilge pumps, scanning for rusted weld seams, ensuring life jackets were in date. Davis answered a few questions about how to sense subtle vibrations or changes in a boat's tilt. He didn't pretend Avery replaced a thorough mechanical inspection, but suggested that dogs can pick up nuances humans miss. One fisherman, Thomas, raised a hand. "You think any dog can do that? Or is it unique to Pitbulls?" Davis chuckled, glancing at Avery. "All dogs have strong senses. But a breed like this, known for loyalty, might be more attuned to their owner's environment. Main point is the bond you share. At the session's end, participants lingered in small clusters, discussing boat repairs or praising Avery. A few overcame their initial hesitation to give the Pitbull a pat or two. Davis felt a warm sense of community. Julie approached with a light in her eyes. Your talk was perfect, informal, direct. Seeing Avery sniff that boat was the highlight. People love it. Davis shrugged, a bit shy, but appreciative. He ruffled Avery's ears, the dog's breath fogging in the chilly air as she panted contentedly. As the crowd dispersed, a teenage girl wearing a thick scarf and beanie approached Davis. Sir, I was terrified of pit bulls, she admitted softly. But your dog, I can see she's so gentle. My dad says we might adopt a rescue dog. Thank you. She crouched, letting Avery sniff her glove. Davis gave a small nod. I'm glad you see it now. Good luck finding a pup that fits your family. Just give them love and structure. The teen grinned, eyes flicking from Avery to her father, who nodded supportively. Another quiet step in changing hearts. Unexpected allies. In the days following, Davis returned to his normal routines, brief fishing excursions, boat maintenance, quiet nights in his boathouse office. Avery accompanied him unwaveringly, content to watch gulls swirl or rummage for interesting scents along the dock. One afternoon, a knock on the boathouse door startled Davis. Opening it, he found a small group of local rescue volunteers from a Pitbull advocacy group called Harbor Hearts. They introduced themselves, explaining how they'd heard about Avery's feats. They were hosting a fundraiser to support vet bills for sheltered pit bulls, hoping to feature local success stories. They asked if Davis would consider letting them photograph Avery by the water. Maybe share a short testimonial. Though typically avoiding such spotlight, Davis recognized the potential benefit for dogs needing homes. He let them snap pictures of Avery on the dock. Near Bluefin's Hope, a volunteer jotted notes about the day Avery saved the boat from a dangerous leak, capturing Davis's candid quotes about trust and bond. They left with gratitude, promising to highlight Avery in a small social media post, a Pitbull guardian at Seagrove Harbor. Days later, that post garnered a flurry of supportive comments, many from outside the region. Some wrote, "I've never heard of a Pitbull on a fishing boat. This is so heartwarming." Others chimed in with their own Pitbull success stories. The combined effect was a wave of positivity that overshadowed typical negativity that often pervaded online discussions of the breed. Davis, reading them, felt a gentle flicker of hope that if enough personal stories surfaced, public opinion might pivot further away from outdated biases. A test of stormy seas. Then, in midwinter, a strong storm system moved along the coastline. Meteorologists predicted heavy winds, rough seas, and potential flooding. Seagrove Bay's breakwater offered some protection, but the harbor could still face punishing waves. The entire wharf community braced for impact, doubling mooring lines, verifying bilge pumps, stocking sandbags near certain lower docks. Davis, wary of serious storms, decided to stay overnight on Bluefin's Hope to ensure everything remained secure. He'd done so in previous storms, checking lines through the night in case any threatened to snap. Avery, of course, would be with him, watchful. As dusk settled, the wind howled, rattling loose flags along the pier. Gray clouds overshadowed the last glimmer of daylight. Rain pelted in sheets. The water's surface churned into frothing whitecaps. Davis sat in the boat's small cabin, a lantern illuminating the interior. Avery lay near the door, eyes half-lidded but ears on alert for any abnormal thuds or water intrusion. Gusts rattled the windows, each strong gale rocking the boat side to side. Around midnight, Davis dozed in a battered armchair, lulled by the engine's reassuring hum used to power small cabin lights. Avery dozed too, muzzle on her paws. Outside, the storm peaked, wind shrieking. The wharf's overhead lamps flickered in and out. Suddenly, Avery jerked upright, letting out a sharp bark. Davis jolted awake, heart pounding. "What is it, girl?" She barked again, trotting to the door, nose pressed against the gap. He heard a strange scraping noise from the stern, possibly debris or a loose line. Grabbing a flashlight and donning a slicker, he followed Avery out, bracing against the wind. Rain stung his face as he inched around the boat's deck. Avery, pawing near a coil of rope, barked once more. The rope was fine, so what was the dog upset about? Davis trained his flashlight on the stern. Through the deluge, he spotted a floating piece of metal banging repeatedly against the hull. It looked like part of a broken docking bracket from a neighboring boat, tossed loose by the waves, now threatening to gouge or dent Bluefin's hope. Left unchecked, it could cause a serious hull breach. Fighting the wind, Davis carefully maneuvered to snag the metal with a boathook, cursing under his breath at each jolt. Avery barked encouragement, or so it seemed. After a tense struggle, he hauled the debris aboard. A jagged chunk of rusted steel bracket. The boat's hull bore a few superficial scrapes where it had knocked. Davis exhaled in relief, no major damage. Avery wagged, though the wind whipped water across them both. Again, good call, Davis muttered, patting the dog's drenched head. I'd never have heard that banging above this storm. He stowed the bracket safely. The dog's vigilance saved them from waking to a battered hull in the morning. He retreated inside, water dripping from his slicker. Avery shook out her coat vigorously. The storm raged for hours more, but Davis felt calmer, trusting if any new threat arose, Avery would bark again. Indeed, near 2 a.m., she let out a small growl, prompting Davis to double-check mooring lines. Another line had slackened under the strain, so he retied it. By dawn, the storm ebbed, leaving behind battered dock planks and scattered debris. Yet Bluefin's hope remained secure, courtesy of those midnight interventions. Word spread among dockworkers about Davis's nighttime vigil, and how Avery's alarms saved the boat from being whacked by drifting metal. Another notch in the dog's local legend. One older fisherman, Walt, teased that Davis owed the dog a new fancy collar for hazard pay. Davis half laughed but indulged, purchasing a sturdy new harness embroidered with a small anchor emblem. Avery wore it with quiet dignity, as though aware it marked another milestone towards a brighter horizon. As the final throes of winter gave way to a crisp, blossoming spring, Seagrove Bay awakened to new life. Fishing season ramped up, more folks visited the wharf. Gulls nested on pilings. Davis had the hull fully repainted, giving Bluefin's hope a fresher look for the year. Avery oversaw the process from the dock, occasionally sniffing the fresh paint with mild disapproval. Some neighbors joked that the boat's new sheen was second to the dog's vigilance in preventing disasters. A new phenomenon occurred. A few boat owners, previously apprehensive of pit bulls, began adopting or fostering dogs from the local shelter. One even chose a stocky pit mix, citing Avery's example as inspiration. Davis was quietly thrilled. Each time he saw the dog training on the wharf, or sniffing the deck, he realized how far one dog's story had traveled. Meanwhile, Avery's presence became as integral as the harbor's daily tide chart pinned to the dock notice board. People greeted her by name, offered a pat or treat, or joked about signing her on as an official wharf guard. Near the start of the new season, Davis weighed a significant decision. He'd always been a simple fisherman, no illusions of grandeur. But an opportunity arose to join a small co-op that specialized in sustainable fishing tours for eco-minded tourists. They needed a reliable skipper who could show novices the ropes, teach them about marine life, and ensure safe passages. The co-op was intrigued by Avery's local fame, suggesting the dog might be a highlight for guests uncertain about venturing offshore. For days, Davis debated. Accepting would mean more structured runs, dealing with guests daily, lesser solitude, but it might also give him stable income and a chance to run a safer, educational environment. Avery's presence could calm anxious novices. Ultimately, after discussing details with the co-op's lead, he agreed to test it for a season. The concept of merging a Pitbull's watchful care with gentle eco-tours appealed to him. Possibly, it was another channel for changing hearts. So that spring, Bluefin's Hope not only fished for profit but carried small groups of curious travelers, some families, some nature enthusiasts wanting to see how a real working boat operated. They'd board early, receive a safety briefing from Davis, and meet Avery, who often wagged at the top of the gangplank. Children especially adored her, calling her the boat dog. She would stand by calmly as Davis explained life jackets, lines, emergency protocols. People who once twitched at the mention of Pitbull found themselves reaching to scratch her ears, lulled by her steady eyes. On water, The novices sometimes grew anxious in rocking swells. But Avery's presence soothed them. If a child squealed over a slight tilt or wave, she'd trot over, offering a reassuring nuzzle. Davis pointed out that was how she'd sense bigger issues, like hull leaks or drifting debris. The tourists listened, enthralled. A few older guests, shaky about stepping onto a boat for the first time, admitted they felt safer seeing how the dog remained unafraid. "If she's calm, maybe the sea's not so scary," they'd remark, half in jest. In time, the tours integrated short nature lessons, Davis explaining local fish species, pointing out how to read the water's texture for hidden shoals. Avery served as an icebreaker, letting kids ask about how dogs adapt to life afloat. Davis would share small anecdotes of her subtle warnings, from the day she sniffed out a rope about to snap to preventing a child from nearly slipping. The story of the hull leak detection inevitably surfaced, usually eliciting raised eyebrows or nods of awe. One day, a father named Russell came aboard with his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, who had a deep fear of open water. She clung to the boat rail, white-knuckled, face tense. The father tried comforting her, but Lily's anxiety soared with each wave. Avery took it upon herself to stand near Lily, pressing gently against the girl's knee. Over time, Lily unclenched, letting her trembling hand rest on the dog's head. By mid-trip, Lily was giggling at small fish sightings, occasionally exclaiming, "Look, Avery!" Another wave. The father later told Davis how his daughter overcame her fear thanks to the dog's unwavering presence. It was a small but profound testament to the synergy of trust. As the season advanced, the co-op recognized the tour's success. Word circulated among eco-tour reviews that a fisherman's Pitbull ensures a calm, unique experience. Some wrote that they had started the trip uneasy about being far offshore, but calmed by the dog's watchful eye. Others told the story of how Avery once prevented a hull breach, praising the dog as a guardian. Bookings rose, fueling the co-op's finances. Davis, though modest, appreciated how these new funds let him keep Bluefin's hope well maintained without cutting corners. In the swirl of this expanded life, Davis sometimes chuckled to himself about how he never sought fame, nor intended for Avery to be a local icon. Yet each step led them further from that unassuming fisherman and dog routine toward a public role that quietly changed how people perceived pit bulls and maritime safety. Sometimes, after a successful day's tour, he'd anchor near a quiet cove, letting guests snorkel in shallow waters. Avery, perched on deck, would watch carefully, tail wagging when each guest climbed back aboard safely. As though counting them, Davis found that new dimension of caretaker rewarding. One starry evening, after docking post-tour, Davis sat on the deck with Avery, admiring the reflection of moonlight across the rippling water. A mild breeze carried the tang of sea salt, and the muffled clamor of gulls rummaging for leftover scraps. He thought about the gentle arcs of transformation. A once-lost hiker named Sasha saved by a dog's senses. A hull leak detected before it became a crisis. A father letting his child read about pit bulls in a library. It was all connected, anchored by one dog's quiet presence in a realm of swirling waters and shifting tides. Avery lay content, muzzle on her paws, occasionally letting out a low huff if a gull's cry startled her. Davis patted her flank. "Who'd have guessed you'd become the harbor's guardian?" "Hey," he said softly. The dog shifted, gazing at him with those big brown eyes that spoke of loyalty. No words needed. The deck gently rose and fell with the water's pulse. Davis breathed deeply, feeling an unspoken gratitude for how a simple bond had bridged so many divides. In that hush, man and dog found their place amid the sea's endless cycle, confident that if any small alarm arose, be it a subtle leak or a frightened child, Avery's senses would ring the warning, carrying them toward safer shores. A frosty wind swept across the Seagrove Bay harbor one final time that winter, rattling rigging lines against aluminum masts and whistling through the stacked lobster traps on the pier. Evening light bled into an ochre dusk, turning water into liquid gold where it caught the glow from overhead lamps. At the far end of the dock, the well-loved trawler Bluefin's Hope sat in quiet silhouette, a gentle presence in a harbor slowly winding down from the day's bustle. Davis Sullivan stood by his boat's railing, letting the wind brush his cheeks. Near his feet, Avery, his brindle pitbull companion, sniffed the damp wood boards, ears tilted to pick up the faintest echo of sea sounds. They had come a long way since Avery first signaled a minor hull leak, warning Davis before a routine day at sea turned into a crisis. His gratitude for the dog's uncanny awareness had multiplied in the seasons that followed. For each small victory, like the day she barked to alert him about debris slamming into the stern during a storm, or the time she guided the uneasy teen deckhand, there were countless quiet moments. Everyday shifts in how the fishing community perceived pit bulls. Now, as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in mauves and pinks, he felt a twinge of nostalgia for how everything had changed and, at the same time, how simply life continued. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, a sign that the final patches of winter's gloom had receded in favor of gentler spring winds. Davis roused early, as usual, collecting a hamper of supplies he needed for the new venture, half fishing, half guided tours. He had agreed to a short weekend trip with 4 travelers who wanted to see how commercial fishing worked on a small scale while also absorbing local marine knowledge. They were to arrive around noon. That gave him time to double-check the boat's upkeep. He always found an odd piece in performing the tasks that kept Bluefin's Hope afloat, lubricating the crane hoist, verifying the bilge pump. Avery padded behind him, occasionally giving a short sniff or whine if something seemed amiss. But these days, the vessel was well maintained. No suspicious rattles or cracks lurking. By midday, the 4 newcomers arrived, 2 young couples from inland areas, wide-eyed at the salt-tinged breeze. They carried daypacks, cameras, and an eager curiosity about boat life. Davis greeted them in his unhurried manner, introduced them to Avery, and watched as initial wariness melted into polite smiles. One of the women, Clara, stooped to let the pitbull smell her hand. "She's so calm," Clara remarked, looking between the dog and Davis. "I've never been around a pitbull up close." Davis nodded. "She's been my partner on the water for a while now. No better deckmate." A flicker of wonder crossed Clara's face, a small sign of prejudice dissolving. They cast off from the dock under a gentle midday sun. The waters lay calm, a mild breeze stirring faint ripples. Avery perched by the bow as the engine purred, scanning the horizon with that steady vigilance. The couples gathered around the deck, listening to Davis's orientation. He explained the layout, lines, nets, the fish hold, the modest cabin. He pointed out basic safety measures, life vests, flares, the radio. Avery, seated at Davis's heel, seemed to confirm each point with a slow tail thump. Davis noticed how the travelers watched the pitbull with a mixture of curiosity and reassurance, as though the dog's presence signaled a well-run ship. That intangible sense of calm had become the hallmark of every new outing. The afternoon turned golden as they cruised to a favored fishing spot. Davis let them try lowering lines for an hour or so, the couples laughing as they experienced the tug of fish. Avery strolled among them, sidestepping rods, occasionally glancing at the shimmering water. The haul was modest, a handful of cod, 2 small halibut, but the travelers didn't mind. They were there for the adventure, not a record catch. Davis explained how to treat each fish responsibly, releasing smaller ones and storing keepers in ice. The dog sniffed the air each time a catch flopped on deck, but never approached aggressively. That stance alone impressed the travelers, who expected a pitbull to be more reactive. Late in the day, Davis aimed to show them a scenic cove where the harbor's rocky shoreline met old pine forests. Approaching, the boat navigated carefully among protruding rock formations. The water here was known for hidden shoals, so Davis slowed to a crawl. Scanning the depth gauge, Avery ambled to the bow again, tail wagging. The sunlight angled across her coat, picking out the brindle stripes. One of the men, Jonas, snapped a few photos of her silhouette. "She's so regal," Jonas murmured. "You ever considered entering her in those therapy dog events or something? She's got a real presence." Davis exhaled a soft laugh. "We did do a library day or two, plus harbor demonstrations. She's a natural caretaker." Reaching the cove, they dropped anchor for a short break. Davis offered refreshments, simple sandwiches and iced tea, and the travelers relaxed, snapping photos of the rugged shore. Avery roamed the deck, occasionally receiving a gentle pet from one of them. Clara, holding her phone, recorded a short video capturing Avery's calm gaze against the backdrop of pine-fringed cliffs. "I can't believe how safe I feel with a dog around," Clara admitted, shaky with excitement. "I used to fear big dogs, especially pit bulls, but she's totally different from what I expected." A quiet pride warmed Davis. This shift, one story, one boat trip, one personal encounter, was how mindsets changed. He recalled the times Avery had prevented trouble, from detecting leaks to alerting him about drifting hazards. Each demonstration overshadowed the negative hype many associated with the breed. So, as they ate, he regaled the group with a few short anecdotes. How Avery once barked at the slightest hint of an engine belt loosening, or how she often guided anxious kids on the wharf. By the end, the travelers expressed nothing but admiration. Before sunset, Davis steered the boat back toward Seagrove Bay, ensuring they'd arrive ahead of dusk. The ocean turned orange under the lowering sun, a quiet hush falling over the group. Avery nestled near Davis at the helm, content with the day's outing. The couples parted ways at the dock, each stepping onto the pier with gratitude, some patting Avery's head in farewell. "This was amazing," Clara said, half reluctant to leave. "You two make quite the team." Davis nodded, the edges of his mouth curling into the softest smile. "I'm glad we could show you the sea at its gentler side." That night, back at his modest boathouse office, Davis wrote up the day's log. Avery slept in her usual corner, muzzle on her paws. Now and then, Davis glanced her way, reflecting that once, this dog was seen as a questionable choice for a fisherman's companion. But days like today proved she was the best match he could have asked for. He tapped a short text to the co-op's group chat, praising Avery's help, and receiving a swirl of dog emojis and good-natured jokes in return. Time glided forward, each day a quiet echo of the last, sprinkled with small events reinforcing the Pitbull's role in this maritime microcosm. Davis continued the short eco-fishing tours, watched by Avery's calm gaze. The dog was so integrated into the routine that Davis rarely noticed how he'd check her face for subtle signals. If something were off, a bilge pump failing, lines tangling, Avery would tilt her head or whine. He teased that she was a better alarm system than any installed device. The watery horizon, so vast and unpredictable, felt more approachable with her at his side. Eventually, the shifting weather signaled another seasonal transition, ushering summer back with warm breezes. The wharf returned to bustling with day trippers, from families hoping to see playful seals to anglers seeking big catches in deeper water. Davis's tours thrived, word of mouth spreading that the Pitbull boat offered not just scenic fishing but a calm sense of security. Some parents who boarded insisted their children greet Avery first, building confidence for the ride. "If the dog's relaxed, we can be too," they'd say. Davis gleaned deeper meaning from those remarks. That acceptance of one misunderstood dog helped quell fears about the sea itself. Sasha, the once lost hiker, reappeared one weekend, unexpectedly booking a spot on the co-op tour. She wanted to experience a day on the water, especially since mountains were how she first discovered the helpful nature of a Pitbull's senses. Davis recognized her instantly at the dock. Her bright grin and proud stance indicated she'd come far from that fearful day in the forest. Avery, trotting up, wagged happily when Sasha greeted her by name, bending to scratch behind the dog's ears. "Didn't think I'd see you skip the mountains for a fishing boat." Davis teased gently. Sasha shrugged. "I realized adventures can be found in many places, like on a boat with a remarkable Pitbull." She joined the tour with a handful of other guests, blending seamlessly. The day felt symbolic. This same dog that guided her out of the pines now guided them across open water. Sasha, beaming throughout, occasionally recalled her mountain ordeal for the new folks. "I wouldn't be here if not for her nose and unwavering presence," she said, voice raw with sincerity. Avery accepted the praise by leaning closer, tail softly wagging. By day's end, Sasha parted with a final, emotional pat for the dog, promising to come back again. "You saved my life once," she whispered, "but you've changed it in ways that keep unfolding." As the harvest of summer yields soared and the first autumn leaves threatened to reappear, Davis stood on the deck of Bluefin's Hope one mild morning, reflecting on how many arcs had converged in Avery's story. The library fiasco where a Pitbull saved a choking child, the mountain rescue of a lost hiker, the maritime rescue of a boat threatened by a hull leak. The gentle day-to-day transformations with kids on reading mats or anxious newcomers on the wharf. All these threads, each leading back to a single premise, a dog's devotion. Bridging fear and forging acceptance. No single day overshadowed the rest, no grand final rescue. No cinematic moment of triumph. Instead, the Pitbull's consistent vigilance continued to weave into the everyday tapestry of Seagrove Bay. She'd bark softly to alert Davis if the mooring line sagged, or if a latch corroded. She'd rest her muzzle on the knee of a panicked child stepping onto the boat. She'd greet an elderly fisherman who used to distrust the breed, now stooping to offer her bits of leftover cod in thanks. In these small acts, the legacy of her heroism blossomed perpetually. By the close of that day, after returning from a short netting trip in mild seas, Davis moored the boat in his usual berth. The setting sun painted the horizon in orange and pink gradients. Avery hopped onto the dock, waiting for him to secure lines. Once done, they strolled the length of the wharf, greeting passers-by. Gulls circled overhead in search of scraps. The echo of distant halyards tinkling in the breeze. A few local kids waved from a bench, calling out, "Hey, Avery." The dog wagged in response. The kids giggled, swirling in the leftover magic that a pitbull had become the wharf's gentle symbol of safety. At the far end, near a small boathouse where Davis often stored supplies, the calm hush enveloped them. He paused, letting Avery sniff at coiled ropes. The ocean's hush murmured in the background, waves lapping pilings. Davis closed his eyes briefly, reflecting on how improbable it was that one dog could unify the entire wharf. Bridging fishermen, families, and even tourism. A sense of warmth fluttered in his chest, seeing that, though no grand ceremony ever crowned Avery's achievements, she was recognized and cherished in each greeting, each nod of respect from a once skeptical neighbor. Ultimately, it was enough for him that the dog thrived in the environment she loved. That the breed's ill repute steadily eroded whenever a child glimpsed Avery's calm or an adult witnessed her timely warnings. And if a day came when the sea or circumstances tested them again, he knew her watchful presence would be ready. Muzzle at the rail, ears tuned to the subtlest change in hull pitch or deck vibration. Twilight deepened, lights along the dock twinkling to life. Davis inhaled the briny air with gratitude. Avery, by his side, let out a soft exhale, perhaps content to share one more peaceful moment in a place that once harbored suspicion for dogs like her. Step by step, they padded back toward Bluefin's Hope, the boat's silhouette a steady friend in the gloom. Tying up for the night, Davis clicked off the last overhead lamp on deck, letting the watery reflection shimmer in starlight. Avery circled once, curled up on her usual spot near the cabin door, and let out a gentle sigh as her eyes closed. Quiet settled in, the hush of the harbor, the faint creaks of lines, the lapping waves, all enveloped man and dog in a lullaby of acceptance. No alarms needed, no crises tonight. The unwavering devotion and extraordinary nose that once saved them from calamity rested. Confident that if tomorrow brought fresh challenges, they'd face it together, one loyal fisherman, one watchful pitbull, forging a story that would remain etched in the memories of Seagrove Bay's docks for years to come.